The Lagos night wrapped itself around Amara like a familiar cloak as she crouched behind the lush bougainvillea surrounding Ezekiel Okafor's estate. Her dark skin and black tactical clothing made her nearly invisible in the shadows. Only her eyes, sharp and calculating, caught the occasional glint of moonlight as they tracked the security detail patrolling the grounds. "Target approaching gate," came the whisper through her earpiece. Amara checked her watch, 22:30, right on schedule. Ezekiel Okafor, CEO of Okafor Industries and one of Nigeria's most successful businessmen, was nothing if not punctual. Amara had spent 3 weeks studying his routines, his security, his weaknesses. She knew he preferred to drive himself home on Fridays, refusing his usual chauffeur. She knew he always took the less-traveled coastal road. She knew exactly where to strike. She slipped away from the estate, mounting her motorcycle with practiced efficiency. The engine's purr melted into the humid night as she raced ahead to the designated point, a secluded curve where the road hugged the coastline, where the crashing waves would mask any sound. Chioma, her employer, had been explicit: bring him unharmed. This isn't about violence. It's about leverage. Chioma Adeyemi, head of a rival corporation and Ezekiel's former business partner, wanted revenge for what she called the ultimate betrayal. Amara didn't need details. The payment was substantial enough to set her up for a fresh start far from Nigeria's tangled corporate wars. 15 minutes later, headlights appeared around the bend. Amara pulled down her mask and readied the spike strip. The timing had to be perfect. The luxury car hit the spikes at exactly 70 kilometers per hour. Tires blew instantly. The vehicle swerved dangerously close to the guardrail before coming to a halt. A tall figure emerged, cursing fluidly in both English and Igbo. Ezekiel Okafor was even more impressive in person than in the photographs Amara had studied. 6 feet of confident posture, dressed in a charcoal suit that contrasted sharply with his deep ebony skin. His face, illuminated briefly by his phone's glow, showed irritation rather than fear. That would change soon enough. Car trouble? Amara approached casually, her gun concealed beneath her jacket. Dangerous place to be stranded, sir. His eyes narrowed, more in suspicion than appreciation of the slender figure before him. I have assistance coming. Thank you for your concern. His voice was deep, cultured, with the slight accent of someone educated abroad but who had deliberately maintained his Nigerian roots. I'm afraid your call didn't go through, Amara said, her own accent deliberately softened. No signal here. She moved closer. Recognition dawned in his eyes too late, he'd seen her face somewhere before. As he reached inside his jacket, Amara struck. The sedative took effect almost immediately. She caught his substantial weight as he collapsed, lowering him carefully to the ground. Package secured, she spoke into her comm device. Within minutes, the van arrived. As they loaded the unconscious businessman, Amara caught herself studying his face, the strong jawline, the slight frown that remained even in unconsciousness. Something unexpected stirred within her, something that had no place in a professional abduction. Sentiment is a luxury in our line of work, her mentor had once warned her. Yet as the van doors closed and they began the journey to the safehouse deep in the Delta region, Amara found herself wondering about the man behind the reputation, the human being beneath the corporate titan. She silenced these thoughts firmly. This was business. Nothing more. But as Ezekiel stirred slightly, his shoulder pressing against hers in the swaying vehicle, Amara had the unsettling feeling that this assignment would challenge more than just her professional skills. It would test boundaries she had built carefully over years in a dangerous profession, boundaries that kept her alive, efficient, and most importantly, emotionally detached. The road stretched ahead, dark and uncertain, much like the path she now found herself traveling. The safehouse emerged from the morning mist like a specter, a colonial-era building reclaimed by the lush vegetation of the Niger Delta. Located 3 hours from Port Harcourt, it stood on stilts above marshy ground, accessible only by boat through the labyrinthine waterways that served as nature's security system. Ezekiel Okafor awoke with the disorientation of someone violently displaced. His hands were bound, but not uncomfortably so. The room was sparse but clean, a bed, a chair, a small bathroom. The windows were barred, but offered views of endless greenery and water. This was no amateur operation. When the door opened, he expected thugs, rough men with rougher intentions. Instead, he found himself looking at the woman from the road, now dressed in simple linen pants and a fitted top that did nothing to diminish her obvious strength and capability. "You're the last person I expected to be involved in something like this," he said, voice still hoarse from the sedative. "Amara Kalu. Your reputation in security circles is impressive." Amara concealed her surprise. Few knew her real name, fewer still would recognize her face. "And yet here we are, Mr. Okafor. You should drink some water. The effects of the sedative will wear off faster. Why not simply kill me? Is this about ransom? Corporate secrets?" His eyes, clear and unflinching, studied her with the same intensity she had studied him. It was unsettling. "My employer has questions. When they're answered satisfactorily, what happens next depends entirely on you." She placed a tray of food beside him, rice, plantains, fish stew. Simple but nourishing. "You'll be here a while. You should eat." "And if I refuse?" Amara shrugged. "Then you'll be hungry as well as captive. I'm not here to force-feed you, Mr. Okafor." Something like respect flickered across his face. "At least tell me who paid for my abduction. I have a right to know who values me so highly." "You know exactly who," Amara replied. The question is why her anger runs deep enough to orchestrate this. For the first time, uncertainty crossed Ezekiel's features. He looked away, toward the window and the wilderness beyond. "There are complications you don't understand." "I don't need to understand. I just need to deliver you when the time comes." Over the next 3 days, a strange routine developed. Amara brought meals, checked his restraints, which were removed except during her absences, and endured his increasingly personal questions. Why had someone with her skills chosen this work? What had shaped her into this precise, controlled woman who moved like a predator but spoke like a scholar? She deflected, of course. But in the humid afternoons when the safehouse grew quiet except for distant animal calls and the soft hum of the generator, their conversations wandered into unexpected territory, books they had read, places they had traveled, observations about life's peculiar twists. "Your security system at the western gate has a 3-second delay," she told him on the 4th morning, not entirely sure why she was sharing this professional observation. Ezekiel smiled slightly. "I know. It's deliberate. Sometimes what appears to be a weakness is a carefully laid trap." The statement lingered between them, heavy with implications that extended beyond security systems. That evening, as thunder rolled across the delta, Amara received the call she had been both expecting and, strangely, dreading. Chioma would arrive tomorrow. The questions would be asked. Decisions would be made that were entirely out of Amara's control. "Do you know what Chioma believes I've done?" Ezekiel asked as lightning illuminated the room, casting sharp shadows across his features. "It's not my concern." "It should be," he said quietly. "When you deliver someone to judgment, it reflects on your own sense of justice. Are you certain you're on the right side of this particular story?" For the first time in her career, Amara felt doubt creep into her certainty. The storm outside matched the turbulence within as she found herself affected by this man who spoke to her not as a captor but as an equal, who saw past her professional exterior to something she herself had forgotten existed. "Tell me your version, then," she said finally, pulling the chair closer to his bed. "You have until morning to convince me." As the rain lashed against the windows and the night stretched before them, Ezekiel Okafor began to speak, his deep voice weaving a narrative far more complex than the simple tale of betrayal Amara had been sold. And despite every instinct honed through years of maintaining emotional distance, she found herself listening, not just with her ears, but with something deeper, something that recognized truth when it resonated in another's words. The storm had passed, leaving behind that peculiar stillness that follows nature's fury. Dawn painted the delta waters gold and amber as Amara stood on the rickety dock, her mind replaying Ezekiel's words from the night before. Chioma and I were more than business partners, he had told her, his voice low and intense in the storm-darkened room. We were lovers, yes, but also visionaries with different methods. The Okavango project wasn't just about profit, it would have brought sustainable energy to 17 communities. The project, he explained, had been compromised not by his betrayal but by Chioma's impatience. She had made deals with government officials known for corruption, had agreed to environmental shortcuts that would have poisoned the same communities they claimed to help. I didn't steal the project from her, Ezekiel had said. I saved it from becoming another colonial-style extraction that takes from Africa while claiming to give back. I offered her a clean path forward. She chose revenge instead. Now, watching a fisherman navigate the early morning waters, Amara weighed truth against lies, integrity against deception. Her instincts, honed through years of dangerous work, told her Ezekiel was being honest. But instincts could be compromised by feelings she was reluctant to acknowledge. The soft buzzing of her satellite phone interrupted her thoughts. Chioma's distinct voice came through, crisp with anticipation. We're 20 minutes out. Prepare him. Amara returned to find Ezekiel standing by the window, his profile strong against the morning light. Without restraints, dressed in the clean clothes she had provided, he looked less like a captive and more like a man momentarily paused in his natural trajectory. She's coming, Amara said simply. He turned, his eyes finding hers with uncomfortable perception. And have you decided what role you'll play when she arrives? The question hung between them, laden with implications. Amara had been paid half her fee up front, enough to vanish comfortably, but not enough for the new identity and fresh start she had planned. The remainder would come when she delivered Ezekiel to Chioma. I've never failed to complete a job, she said, more to herself than to him. There's always a first time. He moved toward her, close enough that she could smell the sandalwood soap she had provided. The real question is, what happens after this job? Does Amara Kalu disappear to become someone new? Do you erase yourself again, as you've done before? Running from what, I wonder? Her head snapped up. You know nothing about me. I know enough. His voice softened. I know you were born in Enugu, educated in London. I know you returned to Nigeria after your father's suspicious death, determined to understand power structures from the inside. I know your skill set is wasted in service to people like Chioma. Amara's hand instinctively moved to the knife concealed at her waist. You've been investigating me. Knowledge is protection, he replied, unperturbed by her defensive posture. Did you think you were the only one gathering information? The difference is what we choose to do with what we learn. The distant sound of a motorboat cut through the tension. Choices crystallized in the humid air between them, professional obligation against moral clarity, practiced detachment against unexpected connection. You have 2 minutes to decide, Ezekiel said, his eyes never leaving hers. Help Chioma destroy everything I've built, including the future of those 17 communities, or help me stop her. Either way, your life changes today. Outside, the boat engine grew louder. Amara's mind raced through scenarios, calculations, consequences. Her reputation, her payment, her future, all hanging in the balance. What exactly would helping you entail, she asked, her voice steady despite the turmoil within. Ezekiel's expression remained grave. Chioma won't come alone. She'll have at least 2 security personnel, professionals like yourself, but without your ethics. We'd need to neutralize them, secure Chioma, and reach my contact in Port Harcourt. From there, we expose the corruption behind her operation. And I'm simply supposed to trust that you'll protect me from the consequences? My profession requires discretion, not public whistleblowing. I'm not asking you to stand in the spotlight, he said. I'm asking you to stand on the right side, even if no one ever knows but you. The boat was less than a minute away now. Amara made her decision in the moment between one heartbeat and the next, not with cold calculation, but with something deeper, something awakened by the unexpected honesty in this man she had been paid to betray. She moved quickly, retrieving Ezekiel's confiscated phone from her hidden safe, along with an extra weapon. This doesn't mean I trust you completely, she warned, pressing the gun into his hand. It means I'm choosing to believe your version over hers. If you're lying to me. I'm not, he said simply. The certainty in his voice compelled her to meet his gaze once more. What she saw there wasn't triumph or manipulation, but relief and something softer, something that made her look away first. Then let's get ready, she said, checking her own weapon. We have about 30 seconds to change the story. As the boat bumped against the dock and voices called out, Amara and Ezekiel positioned themselves on either side of the door, adversaries turned allies, bound by a truth that had revealed itself in the aftermath of a storm. Chioma Adeyemi had the kind of beauty that was weaponized early in life, sharp cheekbones, calculating eyes, and a smile that never quite reached those eyes. She entered the safehouse with the confidence of someone accustomed to worlds bending to her will, flanked by 2 men whose military bearing confirmed Ezekiel's prediction. Amara, darling, Chioma's voice dripped with artificial warmth. Where is our guest? Hidden in the shadows of the adjoining room, Amara watched through the crack in the door as the 3 moved further into the space. Ezekiel was positioned on the opposite side, patient as a hunter. He's secured in the back room, Amara replied, stepping into view, her posture deliberately relaxed. But before I hand him over, I want the rest of my payment. Chioma laughed, the sound brittle. Always the professional. The money will be transferred once I've had my conversation with Ezekiel. That's not how this works, Amara countered. Payment on delivery was our arrangement. One of the security men shifted, his hand moving subtly toward his weapon. Amara noted the movement without appearing to notice. Plans change, Chioma said, her facade of pleasantness thinning. Bring him out. Now. The tension in the room thickened. This was the moment where paths diverged irrevocably. Amara made a show of reluctance, then nodded toward the back room. He's through there. Hands still bound. As the first security man moved toward the door, Ezekiel struck, swift and precise. The man went down with a surprised grunt. The second reached for his weapon, but Amara was faster, her kick connecting with his wrist before her elbow found his temple. Chioma's composure shattered. She reached into her handbag, but Ezekiel was already there, his hand closing around her wrist. Looking for this? He held up a small pistol. You always did prefer the personal touch. You bastard, Chioma spat, her beautiful face contorted with rage. After everything we built together. After everything I built that you tried to corrupt, Ezekiel corrected, his voice calm despite the tension vibrating through his frame. The documents are already with the authorities, Chioma. The offshore accounts, the bribes to environmental officials, the falsified impact studies, all of it. You're bluffing, she hissed, but uncertainty had crept into her expression. Am I? Ezekiel glanced at Amara. Show her. Amara produced Ezekiel's phone, displaying emails sent during the brief window when he'd had access to it. Chioma's face drained of color as she recognized the recipients, the Federal Ministry of Environment, the International Oversight Committee, key journalists. You've ruined everything, Chioma whispered. No, Ezekiel's voice softened fractionally. I've saved what matters. The project will proceed, but cleanly. Without exploitation, without corruption. Amara secured the unconscious guards with their own restraints, her mind already calculating their next moves. They would need to leave immediately, to reach Port Harcourt before Chioma's wider network realized something had gone wrong. What will you do with her? Amara asked, nodding toward Chioma, who now sat rigidly on a chair, her fury replaced by cold calculation. She'll face the consequences of her actions, Ezekiel said. But legally, through proper channels. Don't be naive, Chioma cut in. You think your hands are clean in all this? We both know about Abuja, about what happened with Minister Obasanjo. A shadow crossed Ezekiel's face, but he remained steady. The difference is, I've made amends for my mistakes. I've changed the direction of my legacy. You're still trying to profit from suffering. Outside, thunder rumbled again, another storm approaching. The parallel wasn't lost on Amara as she finished securing Chioma to the chair. We need to move, she said to Ezekiel. Her driver will become suspicious soon. They gathered only essentials, Amara's credentials, weapons, Ezekiel's evidence. As they prepared to depart, Chioma's voice stopped them, its venom cutting through the humid air. You've chosen the wrong side, Amara. Do you really think he sees you as anything more than convenient? Men like him use women like us and discard us when we're no longer useful. Amara paused at the door, turning to look at her former employer. The difference between us, Chioma, is that I recognize when I'm being used, and by whom. She glanced briefly at Ezekiel before continuing. I don't know what happens after today. But I know what happens if I remain your instrument. They left Chioma secured but unharmed, with water and a communication device programmed to activate after 4 hours, enough time for them to reach safety, not enough for her to suffer unduly. The storm broke as they took the smaller, faster boat Amara had kept as a contingency. Rain lashed their faces as they sped through the waterways, Ezekiel navigating with surprising skill while Amara kept watch for pursuit. In the chaos of the elements, with visibility reduced to mere meters ahead, something shifted between them, trust born of necessity solidifying into something more complex, more enduring.